Welcome back to the All Out Fighting YouTube channel. Today it's been the media workout here in Canary Wharf, which is also where this lovely shiny new studio is, for head of Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn this weekend. I'm Ned Keating, again joined by Martin Domin. I almost tried to take your name there. Maybe you would have seen, if I did announce myself as yourself, you'd have seen a few bits this evening that you could have put into practice there, but hopefully we won't have to see that at all. What we will see, though, is your thoughts on what you saw from both fighters. And for me, it was interesting, at least, because normally when you get to these media workouts, public workouts, open workouts, they go under different names at different events, don't they, of course. But normally they're quite boring and stale affairs, and you don't tend to learn too much. But for both fighters today and tonight, they really seem to be determined to put on a show for those that were there. There was no holding back, it seemed, from both of them, really putting in the punches.
It was a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise, because even the undercard fighters actually didn't do very much, which I thought might set the tone for the main event. Again, they did a day of media. We saw the grand arrivals the other day. We've got a press conference, a weigh-in to come. They've got a lot to do, so they will try and cut corners where they can. But we did see, a good session from Conor Benn, who then watched most of Chris Eubank's lengthy session. I think got a bit bored eventually, had seen enough and left. But yeah, surprisingly, both men doing a fair bit 3 days out.
Yeah, Conor Benn was the first one into the ring, so we'll talk about him first. And the luxury that we all had being there, where it wasn't open to the public as much, although there were one or two people, and some people that we knew as well, that managed to get their way in there, but we'll leave that for another time. What it allowed was for journalists to be a lot closer to the ring this time, and to get a bigger sense of the kind of power that they were both packing, and Conor Benn in particular. I mean, I was a little bit closer. I mean, only about 2 foot closer than when you were stood, but you could still hear the sounds reverberating around the small room that we were in. It was quite something to behold, the power that he was punching with.
It's difficult to decide whether or not that was deliberate. He's coming up in weight. Whether you want to say he's coming up from 147 or 154 is up to you. But he has something to prove, perhaps, to those who say he is too small and therefore not powerful enough for Chris Eubank Jr. So maybe that was in the back of his mind, and he just wanted to make it sound good, look good. There were a few punches which he threw from angles and positions that he will never find himself in a fight, almost as if, as I said, he was just hammering home the point that he's got power and can hit a pad hard, very different in a fight. But yeah, I think we'll come on to Chris Eubank Jr., but definitely Conor Benn, as I say, whether deliberately or that's just what he does, tried to show as much power as he could.
Is there anything that we saw from Conor Benn tonight that would, I wouldn't say scare Chris Eubank Jr., I don't think there's anything that scares boxers at the highest level, but perhaps then give him food for thought going into Saturday's fight, something to perhaps consider that maybe he might not have been expecting, or all the cards being kept up the sleeves at this point?
If Conor Benn was going to try and surprise Chris Eubank Jr. on Saturday, he certainly wouldn't do it on Wednesday night. So, and I'd be shocked if he does bring some brand new tactics that we've never seen before to this fight. So the answer to your question is no, but it was never going to be a surprise. And I think, Chris Eubank Jr., as far as I was aware, wasn't even in the room. I doubt he's going to go home and study what he saw. It was very much just a show.
Yeah, so Chris Eubank Jr. second into the ring tonight. And as you said earlier on, Chris Eubank Jr. wasn't in the room when Conor Benn was taking part, but Conor Benn stuck around to watch Chris Eubank Jr. I think he was doing TV duties or one of the broadcasters he was working with. And he joined all the pundits, and I think everyone in the room cottoned onto it, he joined all the pundits in watching Chris Eubank take part in his media workout. And for his part as well, Eubank looked over, saw Conor Benn, and that was probably the only time that his eyesight at least left the ring, left his coaches. Everything else he was looking. I mean, it was kind of almost like the grand arrivals, where he came across very businesslike, and that's what it felt like again tonight. That there's a job to be done here. This is another part of it. He went through his lengthy, as you said, and he showed enough and plenty of tricks in the box, but it still felt that this was a guy that was kind of not putting on too much of a show, but again, going through the motions. This is it. This is the next part of the job. Then tomorrow, then Friday, then fight night.
Yeah, I think there are a few things possibly that you can take away from Chris Eubank Jr. One, unlike Conor Benn, who is either happily sitting at the middleweight limit at the moment, or he's maybe gone a bit lower and will come down a little bit before the weigh-in, Chris Eubank Jr. is above the limit, we can say that, and we'll now, or from Thursday, for 24 hours ish, come down in weight, and it will be tough and it will be hard. So the two men were in very different positions in terms of what a workout would do to them. Conor Benn could work out for hours and be fine. Chris Eubank Jr., you don't know how much energy he's got at the moment, how far into his weight cut he is. So the fact that he did 10 minutes, is that fair? A good session. Okay, it wasn't super intense, but we've seen a lot of the time fighters just not interested because they don't have the energy, and the last thing they want to do is show that they don't have the energy 3 days before the fight. So I think the fact he did a good session is interesting, and without sort of trying to hammer home this sort of difference in emotions, you had Conor Benn, who was a bit more forceful, a bit more deliberate with the shots he was throwing, as you say, maybe trying to show off some power, whereas and that could reflect his emotional mentality if you want to read too much into it. And then Chris Eubank Jr. was far more disciplined, moving on his feet more tactical, if you'd like, which could, if we're playing this game, mirror his more relaxed demeanour.
With Chris Eubank Jr. though, and you touched on it there slightly, about the fact of how a lengthy workout, and it was by modern boxing standards, it was quite a lengthy one, how that might impact him in the energy levels, and because of course he's got to do this weight cut and try to get down before the weigh-ins on Friday. I mean, is there a chance then that maybe he has gone too far? I mean, we'll only find out, I suppose, Saturday night if really this might have taken a lot out of him. Because Conor was in the room, he kind of, maybe adrenaline was helping him get through, and that he didn't look too bad doing it, and the impact of it. But we're only going to find out really Saturday night if maybe it was a bit too exertive from him, maybe a bit too exhaustative.
I wouldn't think so, because I think he will do, weight cutting, it will be a lengthy process and will involve a lot of things, and some of that he will still work out. And I think, again, this whole weight thing about, he's coming down from 168, which he's not. He's fought the last few fights in the last few years at 160. He's done this weight cut so many times in his life. And yes, it will be getting harder as he gets older. He's 35 now, 7 years older than Conor Benn, but he's just done it so many times. And he doesn't strike me as someone who, again, will let emotions get the better of him and take a misstep when he's doing something that he's done so many times. He will by now just be so well versed in it.
Again, keeping your cards close to your chest here, but again, I'm not expecting it has been, but are you still assured in your belief that you had at the start of the week as to who you think is going to come out on top? Again, don't reveal it. We're saving that for after the weigh-ins. But are you still confident in your belief as to who you thought would win the fight at the start of the week will still come out on top Saturday night?
Yeah, I would say so. I think you can only judge a fight based on what you know. And nothing has happened that would change what I already know. Therefore, the prediction remains as it did on Monday.
Right, so for us next, we've got the press conferences to come Thursday. Set the scene for those. Of course, the first one between these two really lit the touch paper for this bout. Not that it needed lighting at all. Everything that had gone before it, of course, would have sold it itself. But we had the egg stunt at the first press conference. This is the final press conference before fight night on Saturday. And it kind of feels like that this is when fight night proper, or fight week proper, I should say, really starts to take shape. That we've gone through the formalities and, or as is often the case in these press conferences, it's the first opportunity to land a blow on your opponent, albeit a verbal one.
Yeah, I think what might actually be quite interesting, because the press conference is in the evening, we go back to the weight cut, Chris Eubank maybe into that weight cut. How does he look? Does he look thinner in the face? Does that affect how, verbose he is? And we know how he can be with Conor Benn, and we know that Conor Benn's maybe not as quick to sort of react and go back and forth. So that will be interesting. It'll be interesting as to whether in the 2 months since the egg press conference and the 1-2 days later, whether Conor Benn has not necessarily taken advice, but given some thought as to how he can combat Chris Eubank Jr., because everybody who watched those press conferences knows who came out on top. So, does Conor Benn say absolutely nothing? Does he do Derek Chisora and just tape his mouth and say nothing? Probably not. But, maybe he has thought about different ways to deal with it. Will Chris Eubank Jr. and Eddie Hearn go at it again? And then, of course, the face-off, which, will they keep them a couple of metres apart again? Will they risk? I suspect they probably will, because there's still the chance on Friday to do one final weigh-in, maybe actual face-off face-to-face. Whereas if they risk that on Thursday at the press conference and it goes wrong, then it's definitely cancelled on Friday. And that's the picture you want. The night before, they've weighed in, nose to nose. So, press conference has potential. I doubt there'll be any eggs. But, I certainly think there'll be something to talk about.
Yeah, and it'll probably be the amount of expletives that are used from all fighters on the card, such as modern boxing. Martin, thank you for your time again, as always. Of course, we'll be at the press conferences, so we'll be back to bring you all the analysis from that. Don't forget to get involved in the conversation as well. Drop a comment underneath and let us know your thoughts ahead of Fight Night on Saturday. Better yet, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. But for now, all that's left for me to say is goodbye.